Let's talk about the depth chart, because one of the things I'm always interested in front row play is like the individual players obviously have to look after exactly what they're supposed to do, but in a scrum, do different players work well and better in partnership with other players, or are you just expected to be able to automatically work with whoever you're playing beside?
I think that was definitely the case, 6-7 years ago, when the Irish scrum probably didn't have the strength and depth or the quality it has now. But I think what you've seen with Greg Feek being appointed as national scrum manager, he has a very strong influence over how everybody in Ireland scrums, and that's even how they're taught to scrummage from 16s, 18s, under 20s. So there's a lot more alignment all the way through, whereas before, a Munster tighthead used to scrum differently than a Leinster tighthead. So if you were a Connacht hooker, it wasn't a help to you in terms of being able to play with them, because you have such a short preparation time going into international windows. That team cohesion is usually really important. But because, as I said, Greg Feek and Jerry Flannery has Munster scrummage in it, not the exact same way, but a similar ethos to how Leinster scrummage or Ulster scrummage under Aaron Dundon. It's a lot easier for Joe Schmidt to come in and put the best players together. But having said that, I think if you look at the guys I've picked, there's no shocks. I mean, Cian Healy, Rory Best and Tyke Furlong have built up a lot of game time together as well. So they do know each other really, really well. But I think it's a strength of Irish rugby is that everybody's been taught to scrum with the same core principles.
When Feek goes, what happens then?
Well, I think there's some very strong candidates internally. I mean, I suppose the real test of someone's legacy is what comes after him. And I think if you look at, Jimmy Duffy does a cracking job with the Connacht scrum with probably, less resources than the others. Aaron Dundon has worked extensively with Greg Feek, and and Dan McFarland is very familiar with Greg Feek, and then John Fogarty and Jerry Flannery, are all part of this scrum development coaching group that have come through over the last 3 or 4 years that are making sure that Greg Feek has passed on his knowledge. And I think someone like John, if it comes internally, well, then you're going to have a real consistency there. And I think we should look to have. I know sometimes you want to change, maybe focus a little bit after a cycle of a coach. But I think if you look at the Irish scrum stats, we have the highest percentage of playable ball of any team in World Rugby, and that's testament to how strong our coaching is, and now, in fairness, how strong our personnel is as well. I mean, there's guys have come through like Andrew Porter, etc., who weren't there. We were so reliant on people like John Hayes for years, but now there's real strength and depth in all positions.
Bernard, you mentioned there a moment ago about the differences between Munster and Leinster's style a few years ago when it came to scrummaging. What were those differences stylistically, and what is the definitive Irish style right now?
The definitive Irish style is actually to be very, very honest. Massive focus on 8 people scrummaging together, 16 feet on the ground, and actually not looking to win penalties per se off scrum. It's actually to have a really solid platform to play off. But yet, when they find a weakness, and when the opposition when someone in the opposition breaks rank and changes his angle, well, then obviously that collective shove that comes together will move forward. And then obviously the 8s are very smart and they keep the ball in. So our scrum is more focused towards getting the ball in and out, and giving our back line a really good strike opportunity. The scrum is the best platform from a set piece point of view. The strike off, obviously, 8 forwards are tied in. And that's very much Joe's philosophy and Leinster's philosophy. And whereas before, I think, we all tried to win penalties with our scrum, but it wasn't through scrum dominance. It was probably through a little bit of cheating and cunningness, and everyone had different ways of doing that. Munster had their own set of calls, and we had our own set of calls in Leinster, for example. So it was very, very difficult to get that timing. In a match week of an international. So everything is it's more honest now, which sounds very basic, but it's about the philosophy of getting the ball away quickly and manipulating the angle more so than trying to win penalties. Because when you're very aggressive trying to win penalties, there's a risk of actually giving away penalties, and obviously discipline is a key factor for Joe Schmidt.
So an opposition team that makes a mistake against Ireland, basically, from what I gather here, they're screwed.
Yeah, it's about patience, basically. So the Irish team will be very, very patient. They will stay in position. They will apply that pressure for 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds. And unfortunately for opposition, or fortunately for us, is that sometimes under that pressure, somebody goes off script to the opposition. So, for example, the loosehead might just kick his hips a little bit to be in a better position. But as soon as he does that, it destabilises the whole scrum. So what the Irish team have been very good at is that collective effort. The back rows in the Irish scrum will always scrum until the ball is out, where sometimes the opposition, you see their heads pop up like meerkats and they're worried about the next strike. And then obviously then Ireland would have an advantage of 8 against 7 and suddenly then we get a nudge on. So it's not a passive scrum philosophy, but they know the order in which they want things to happen. So the first priority is to have good clean ball to scrum off or to play off for the back line and then obviously get into our face attack.
I don't know, did you see the TG Carr mic'd up Jerry Flannery before the game against Connacht, and he was just doing bits of like rubbing the shoulder of certain players and this needs to be in, and just the specific details. I presume that's the type of stuff that they're working on relentlessly in training. Yeah,
day in, day out. It's all about feel. So if you look at sometimes in the heat of the moment with the crowd, etc., you can get carried away and become individual. And what he's trying to do there is just make sure that their senses are aware of where the hooker is binding. For example, I think he was talking to the tighter props and Loosehead, just making sure that their shoulders are out. It's just all about really good cues for the referee as well, and being able to feel where the strength is in the scrum and not become individualised. And that kind of thing will be coming all the way down now to little scrum clinics that are happening with the best 18-year-old props in the country. So when they go up to the next level, it's far less daunting. I mean, there was a time when you would need a prop to come out of an academy and he might need 20 games to adapt, whereas he still needs some games to adapt, but he's going into a system where it's very, very similar to what he's been doing, obviously at a higher level of pressure and power, but at least he's not trying to have to learn new ways of doing things.
Let's talk about your depth chart here. So first off, we're going to start with the loosehead position first. So it's Cian Healy, Jack McGrath and Dave Kilcoyne here. We've got Cian Healy ahead of Jack McGrath and Dave Kilcoyne. When you think back a couple of years when McGrath was the starting loosehead for the Lions, at that point it looked like he was going to be the starting loosehead for Ireland for the next half decade, but Cian Healy's resurgence means that he's one of the best looseheads in the world at the moment. Yeah,
and he always should have been, to be honest, and always he was when he was 23, 24, 25, and he was very unlucky. He had an injury where he lost power in his hand, but he actually managed to play through a lot of it. But his form obviously dipped because he wasn't fully 100% fit. So it was a nerve issue, which it was very frustrating. He didn't know when he was going to get back full power, and that affected his scrummaging to a certain extent. But it also affected his ball carrying and his tackling. But he's overcome that now, and I think what we saw was, Jack McGrath went to a Lions tour, and Cian got a proper pre-season. Which he probably never had because he was generally involved in summer tours with Ireland. So, and he's an unbelievable athlete. He's probably the most powerful rugby player I'd say has ever played for Ireland. And he's back now. He's in great shape. He's probably lighter than he ever was. Similar to Kilcoyne as well. Kilcoyne has really slimmed down. He's another powerful athlete. He's in there as third choice on my rankings. And he's a guy that if he came into the Irish squad on a bench or started, you'd have absolutely no worries about him. He's a real impact player. And Jack McGrath's probably a bit unlucky. He hasn't done a lot wrong, but if Jack McGrath would start for any other team, I would say, in the Champions Cup, and he would probably start for nearly every other team internationally. But we have two world-class loosehead props with those two, and it's and that's not using loosehead loosely.
Onto world class, yeah. Onto hooker, we've got Rory Best obviously in the starting role at the moment. You've got Sean Cronin backing him up, and Niall Scannell is third. There's some doubt about whether or not Joe Schmidt sees Sean Cronin as the automatic replacement for Rory Best to start matches. Certainly, when Cronin didn't start in Australia, there was serious questions asked at that point about what Joe Schmidt's intention was, but maybe that was just about a year and a half out from a World Cup saying, well, I need strength and depth and I'm not just going to put all my eggs in your basket.
Yeah, I think so. Listen, I think Cronin's in there because he just keeps getting better and better. I mean, he scored 40 tries between his Leinster and Connacht career already. I mean, there's a lot of top class wingers who haven't that kind of try scoring ratio. And I was humming and hawing about whether I actually put him number one. To be honest, I think his form is top class, and Rory definitely, is obviously his best years are behind him. But I thought Rory's performance against the All Blacks in November, he just laid down a serious marker again to say he is he's the man of possession and he won't be budged. And I think Joe will be very smart. Dan McFarlane will be very smart in terms of how they manage Rory through to the World Cup. But Sean Cronin's breathing down Rory's neck. But I do think as well. I mean, Sean Cronin is a brilliant impact player off the bench, and Rory's just so important. His leadership, his relationship with referees is very smart and very strong, and he's a very, very good scrummager. He's probably a better scrummager than Sean. So I do think Rory will hopefully injury free, go to the World Cup as number one. But I certainly would go for Sean Cronin as number two, because I just think he has something that probably around the pitch. I don't think any other hooker in world rugby. Dan Coles in New Zealand at the best of his form is very explosive, but I think Sean has a little bit more than anyone else in world rugby in terms of his play around the field.
How can you tell Rory Best is a slightly better scrummager?
Well, this is based on my experience. Obviously, that's 5 or 6 years ago. Sean, I'm sure has improved, but Rory Best.
That's going against him, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think so, and I think it will be. Most of the props and locks in Ireland who played with Rory and continue to play with him would say he's the best scrummager. So it's a little bit surprising because he's not the biggest guy in the world. He probably doesn't throw around the most weight in the gym, but he's just technically incredibly strong and very flexible through his hips, and he can get himself into a much lower, stronger position that Sean could have at the time. I'm sure Sean's worked on it, but I do know, having spoken to players who are still playing, Rory Best is still regarded as the best scrummaging hooker in Ireland, which is hard to see on TV. But when you played in the front five, or you played against hookers, there's certain hookers who have that. Shane Byrne, for example, was a phenomenal scrummager as well. And when you played against them, a strong scrummaging hooker has a massive influence on a scrum. Everyone talks about tie head props, and obviously they're very important. But a strong scrummaging hooker can make up for a lot of deficiencies in other areas of the scrum.
Is it possible for Rory Best to get the best out of himself in the Six Nations and the World Cup this year?
Yeah, I think so. But I also think that maybe Joe will be smart and maybe not overplay him as well in terms of minutes. Obviously we've got two very tough games. We've got a tough draw in total, but I do think that there won't be any mad rotation in the Six Nations. I think if you haven't played in November, barring you're out for injury in November, it's going to be very settled. But I do think in terms of, if you can get 55 minutes, 50 minutes, and rest them up a little bit, maybe not play against Italy, that'll be a big help. And also, if Ulster don't make the knockout stages of the Pro 14, or don't make knockout stages of Europe, that might just limit his game time a little bit. He missed a bit of time at the start of the season as well. But listen, it's a fine balance between playing enough to be in form and obviously not overplaying as well. But no doubt the Irish system will manage him, as best they can.
All right, let's move on to tight head. It's Tadhg Furlong, Andrew Porter, and John Ryan makes number 3 here. So, what is the scale of the difference between Tadhg Furlong and Andrew Porter at the moment?
Around the pitch, there is still a difference, but Porter is becoming more and more influential. I just think Tadhg Furlong is the best tight head prop in the world. He has no perceived weakness. He lifts very well. He tackles very well. He cleans out very well when he's legal, and he's an incredibly good scrummager, and he's as honest as days long. So Porter's very similar to Cian Healy in terms of really, really explosive. I think Furlong's got a really good balance between having enough power and explosivity, but really good endurance as well. So he doesn't crash. If you had to play Tadhg Furlong for 80 minutes, I have no doubt he could be as good in the 78 minute as he was in the 7th and 8th. But I think Porter and Cian to a certain extent, are more fast twitch and probably don't have the same endurance qualities. Now they're very, very fit men, but Porter has that power. Porter still has to get that experience of scrummaging, against the best in the world, more regularly. He's very, very powerful, and his power and his strength get him out of trouble. But when you're someone like Tadhg Furlong, and you've had the experience he has, even though he's still relatively young for tight head, there's no scenario he hasn't been in, and because of that, he knows the solution very quickly. Where sometimes with younger props, they have to get into the dressing room at half time, or it's Monday morning under review, where the coach has to show them 4 angles, and they see then what they're up against and how to fix it. So that's the beauty of having, Furlong and John Ryan to a certain extent as well. He's probably come through a lot slower, but he now is a very, very capable tight head prop, and he's been around the block. So we're in a good position going into the World Cup and the Six Nations if those 3 men stay fit. Is
there anybody who is close but not in the top 3 at the moment in any of these 3 positions who might make a bolt if there are injuries, or even if
I think I really like Dennis Buckley and Connacht, to be honest, but hasn't really been in Joe's squad, so he's probably unlikely to bolt through. There's Tracy in Leinster. James Cronin was very in great form a year ago, but Kilcoyne's kind of pushed back over him. I think there is guys outside those 9 players for sure. We have good depth, but for me they're the 9 front runners.